Welcome back to Tongue of the Serpent. Last time, the search for Sabine Devereux led the crew of the Morning Star closer to the physical truth of her death. Her spirit was not merely haunting the house. She was rebounding, pulled again and again towards something left unresolved in her body, her burial, and the bargain that had been made in her name. Lucien, Evelyn, Alice, and Madame Claudette came to understand that Sabine's remains may still hold the hook of Morvant's claim, hidden somewhere among the Devereux dead. Lucifer offered to help retrieve what clung to her, but help from Lucifer is never only help. Meanwhile, Mercy and Cassian followed the trail of the Sisters of the Purple Veil to an abandoned orphanage outside Alexandria, where they discovered something neither of them expected. The sisters may not have been monsters at all. They may have been protecting magical children. But Agnes found the trail too, and now Mercy's daughter Lenore is no longer only missing, she is hunted. And somewhere beyond ordinary roads, Renard Blackwood has fallen into Hecate's keeping, where crossroads, mirrors, and old bargains are beginning to reveal what Lucifer's broken promise made of him. Tonight, Sabine reaches through the glass again. Mercy and Cassian follow the paperwork no one thought to erase, and the dead, the lost, and the unfinished all begin pressing toward the same door. This is Episode 26, Cemetery Bargains. Lucien goes to the widow. By late afternoon, the rain had thinned to a gray residue on the city, the sort of weather that left every stone looking older and every promise less convincing. The decision arranged itself with the grim efficiency of things that ought never to have become necessary, and yet somehow always did. Dr. Alice Renault offered to come first. Of course she did. The good doctor would have followed a marginal note into hell if it appeared properly footnoted and seemed likely to clarify a disputed chronology. She had risen from her chair with notebook in hand, eyes bright with the particular strain of academic alarm that looked from a certain angle almost like enthusiasm.
No,
Madame Claudette said. Alice paused mid-motion, indignant.
I would be useful.
Yes,
Claudette replied.
this is precisely the sort of thing that would make her unpleasant.
She was already going to be unpleasant.
Alice pointed out. Claudette gave her a dry look.
You have such a gift for optimism.
Alice turned to Evelyn, seeking reinforcement. Evelyn did not give it. The house is unsettled, she said. Sabine came through once. Renard nearly did the same. Whatever moved beneath the roads after Lucifer left touched the mirrors here. Mercy and Cassian are due back at any time. Someone needs to remain at the crew in case the house opens its mouth again. Alice lowered herself back into her chair with the expression of a woman being denied fieldwork for reasons that were annoyingly sound. Lucien Devereux then looked to Evelyn.
You should come,
he said. He meant it. Evelyn understood the dead in ways he did not. She understood old disturbances, old buildings, and the sort of spiritual weather that gathered when grief was denied the dignity of conclusion. More to the point, he trusted her in dark places, even when he was in no mood to admit it. But Evelyn had crossed to the mirror above the mantel and stood studying her own reflection with narrowed eyes and intent concentration. "No," she said quietly. Lucien frowned.
Why?
"Because Sabine will try again. Renard will try again. We don't know what happened to him or why he's there. If the glass opens while we are all away, Alice will only have a notebook and an admirable tendency to panic in complete sentences." Evelyn kept her gaze on the mirror. "Mercy is on her way back. She will need someone here, and so will the house." Lucien argued with her in silence for a few seconds, which was his preferred method of losing. So it was Lucien and Claudette who left the Krewe in late afternoon, carrying a large linen bag, because who knew what they might need to bring back with them, while Alice and Evelyn remained in the parlor among the listening mirrors and the old boards of the house, waiting for Mercy and Cassian to return. St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 received them with the reserved hostility of the very old. Lucien made a brief series of precise gestures, fingers cutting faint signs into the dark. Something in the old lock relented at once, as if it had been politely reminded who still understood the language of thresholds. The gate groaned. Rainwater clung to the narrow paths in black seams. White tombs stood in rows like teeth worn smooth by prayer, money, and rot. The air smelled of wet plaster, old iron, candle wax, flowers gone sweet at the edge of decay, and something cooler underneath. Stone opened its mouth. Lucien walked beside Madame Claudette with the severe elegance of a man visiting family under protest. He had known this cemetery in youth. He had known it in its earlier, cleaner dignity, before time had settled into its corners and begun rearranging the dead according to its own ideas of storage. He had overseen the transfer himself in 1789. St. Peter had seemed too cramped, too exposed, too disorderly, run down and ready to be closed or bricked over. St. Louis had seemed worthy, proper, fresh, and new. It was remarkable what a young man could mistake for reverence when what he truly meant was control. The widow was waiting at the Devereux crypt, expectant with something that might have been amusement, if the widow were capable of it. She stood with one gloved hand resting on the stone, as if she had been counting the dead inside by touch. Her black dress hung from her in long, severe lines, with none of the softness mourning usually pretended toward the living. The veil over her face was thin enough to show the pale architecture beneath, and dark enough to make the eyes unreadable. She carried no lantern, as she did not need one. The approaching dark seemed to withdraw from her rather than settle on her. "Lucien Devereux," she said. Her voice was low and dry and without texture, as if it had been pulled across grave dirt on its way out.
"Widow?"
"Madame Claudette," she rasped, nodding her head in acknowledgement. "How lovely to meet you at last. I've heard good things from the spirits and the dead." Madame Claudette inclined her head, trying to control a nervous tremor in her fingers.
"Widow, it's a pleasure."
The widow's gaze returned to Lucien. You took your time.
I was hoping that necessity might improve.
It never does, she responded without courtesy or humor. She said it the way weather said rain. Lucien stepped closer to the crypt.
You know why I'm here.
Yes. Her hand remained on the stone. Your sister is in there. Even Claudette stiffened at how bluntly she said it. The widow turned her head very slightly, listening not to them, but to the crypt itself, as though the dead had become tiresome in their effort to speak over one another. She was interred, the widow said. That is not the same thing as being laid to rest. Lucien said nothing. This vault is full of confusion wearing family manners. Boxes shifted, wood failed, child coffins pushed aside to make room for larger griefs. Adult remains broken, moved, renamed by accident and by convenience. The Devereux dead have been packed together like silver, wrapped for travel. Order at the front with disorder underneath. Her fingers traced the carved surname once. Sabine is hidden inside that disorder, she said. Inside family dead and family silence, which is fitting in its way. Lucien's face hardened.
Where?
The widow turned her head toward him, and whatever lived in her ruined expression seemed to almost smile. Do not ask for the last answer before you have paid for the first. Silence settled between them. Lucien did not move.
You know.
Of course I know. Her voice remained calm, almost bored. The dead are not difficult to follow when they have been denied the dignity of rest.
Then tell me.
I will, she said, when my price has been paid. She let her hand fall from the stone. Her gaze settled on Lucien Devereux with a terrible patience. But the precise place, darling, is dearer than certainty. And certainty, as you know, is never free. The cemetery had gone very quiet. Even the rain seemed to have retired a respectful distance to watch. Lucien looked at the crypt, then back at her.
What's your price?
Her face shifted again, her attention focusing intently on him with something like hunger, the expression of a thing that had smelled blood a very long way off and found it richer than expected. Yes, she said. Time to pay, Lucien Devereux. Madame Claudette shifted her grip on her cane, controlling her desire to tremble with effort. She knew better than to interrupt. One does not interrupt amputation. The widow stepped closer to Lucien. The Devereux name has lasted this long because men like your father believed a name could eat whatever was fed to it. Children, sisters, tenderness, truth. It swallowed them all and called itself dignity. Her voice remained flat, trembling with greed slightly around the edges. You still keep one ember from it. Lucien regarded her with tight control, refusing to give her any sort of satisfaction. She tilted her head, listening to him now as she listened to the crypt.
The last good memory you have of Pierre.
The words landed without haste and without mercy. Lucien did not move. Claudette looked at him sharply. She saw the strike go in. The widow continued in that same flat, dreadful voice.
The last moment you still keep hidden away. The final small lie that perhaps your father loved you once. Perhaps for an afternoon. Perhaps in passing. Perhaps badly. But enough to leave a mark. I want that.
Lucien's voice, when it came, was very controlled.
You want a memory?
I want the only memory that still lets you mourn him as a father, instead of merely survive him as an inheritance.
The widow's veil stirred slightly in the damp air.
I want the last glimmer, the last warmth attached to the name. I want you to lose it.
Something old and violent flashed across Lucien's face, then vanished under discipline. His hand closed into a fist at his side.
And if I refuse?
Then Sabine remains where she is. Hidden among your family's arranged confusion. Loved too late. Found too late. Still spoken of in rooms like this by people who prefer grief to cost.
Lucien looked at the crypt again. He could almost see his younger self there, issuing orders, correcting placements, mistaking care for control. Somewhere beyond the marble and damp wood and old family damage lay Sabine, folded into the ruin he had once helped formalize. He spoke without taking his eyes off the stone.
And if I pay?
The widow's answer came at once.
Then when you think of Pierre, that last bright hour will be gone. You will remember there was one. You will not be able to enter it again. The kindness, whatever it was, will no longer belong to you.
That was worse than forgetting. After everything he had learned about his father, this was the one good thing he still carried. Losing it was surgery. Lucien took a deep breath, steadying himself for later. Mourning could wait. Sabine could not. The widow lifted one hand from the black folds of her dress and held it out between them.
Here.
Lucien stood very still. Then, with the grim precision of a man signing away land he had no right to keep, he stepped forward and bent his head. The widow's fingers came to rest against his temple through the damp chill of the crypt. At once, the memory rose in him, bright with the cruelty of being intact. Pierre Devereux turned half back toward him in a wash of late light, a rare softness in his face, a hand settling once at the back of Lucien's shoulder, as though he had, for that brief and impossible hour, remembered how to be a father. Lucien felt the moment open, felt himself on the brink of falling into it one last time, and then the widow drew in a slow breath. The brightness thinned. Warmth left it first, then sound, then the expression on Pierre's face. What remained collapsed inward like wet paper. Lucien staggered a fraction as her hand withdrew. He knew, with the sick certainty reserved for irreversible things, that something had been taken cleanly from the architecture of him. The room still held his father's name. The tenderness attached to it was gone. Struggling not to stagger, Lucien reached out and steadied himself on the wall of the crypt. He worked to push down the emotions. They could wait until he had the leisure to process all of this. Taking a deep breath, Lucien straightened himself and met the amused cruelty in the widow's eyes.
Where?
He asked, as emotionlessly as possible. The widow lifted her hand and pointed, not at the crypt door, but through the stone, as though it had ceased to be an obstacle to her some while ago.
Lower right quadrant, back interior wall, beneath a later collapse. 2 children's boxes were shifted. An adult coffin was renailed badly. You will smell river damp before you reach the right place.
Her head tipped.
There is a rosary sewn into the seam of the shroud, hidden. A furtive kindness, the kind people offer when they lack the courage to be publicly decent.
When she was finished, Claudette inclined her head in curt acknowledgement. Lucien managed something more formal because Lucien Devereux would probably remain courteous to a guillotine if introduced properly. Then he turned toward the crypt. Madame Claudette stood beside him with the linen bag in one hand and her cane in the other. For once, she made no remark about the state of the stonework, the weather, or the regrettable habits of the dead. Her eyes were fixed on the sealed door ahead of them. The crypt waited in its narrow row, pale with age, its carved name softened by rain and time. Moss had gathered in the seams. Candle wax marked the threshold in old, white scars. Whatever had been hidden there had not wanted to be found kindly. Lucien adjusted his cuffs with unnecessary precision. Then, together, they stepped toward the door. The road starts pulling Cassian. By the time Mercy and Cassian returned to the Krewe, dusk had begun gathering itself over the house in layers. The first layer was blue. The second was candlelight. The third was the kind of old house unease that needed no help from weather and would, given proper encouragement, have managed a haunting on a clear spring afternoon with birdsong. Mercy came to the front door, moving too fast for grief and too rigid for hope. Hope, when it finally arrived after long absence, had a talent for making every delay feel like cruelty. Her daughter was no longer a theory, nor a prayer pressed flat by years, nor a name she whispered into rooms that had nothing to offer back. Lenore was there, in this city, in a building with an address, walls, doors, windows, floors, and a night currently passing over it without mercy. She was not happy at the delay. Alice looked up at once from the parlor door, notebook still in hand. Evelyn rose from the chair near the hearth before Mercy had fully crossed the threshold. She took in Mercy's face, then Cassian's, and something in her expression sharpened at once.
You know where she is,
Evelyn said. Mercy turned toward her, and for one bright, terrible instant, all the anger dropped out of her.
She's there,
Mercy said, voice breaking around the words.
Cassian traced the records. There was no transfer papers, no burial record, no closure. She's there, Evelyn.
Alice made a small sound that was almost joy and almost disbelief, and had not yet decided which was safer. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. For a moment she looked very young and very old at once. The first mother in the world, and simply a woman in a haunted house hearing that someone she loved had been handed back to possibility.
Then we go.
Mercy said immediately.
Now. Tonight.
She was turning already halfway back toward the door, in her spirit, if not yet in her body. Cassian shut it behind them. The latch clicked with a strange finality.
No,
he said. Mercy wheeled around.
No.
The word came out with enough force to count as a small attack. Cassian stood with one hand still on the doorknob. The hallway lamp caught the fine strain at his face, the pallor beneath his skin, the way his shoulders held themselves too carefully. He had been careful all afternoon, careful in the office, careful in the car, careful in the silence between the car and the front steps. It was only now, in the older currents of the house, that the care had begun to look like damage control.
We can't go tonight,
he said.
I can.
That's not the same thing.
Mercy took a step toward him.
She is there.
I know.
She has been there this whole time.
I know.
Then why are we standing in this room having philosophical discussion with the furniture?
The shop lights flickered, enough for everyone to notice, enough to break the growing tension. Alice's gaze lifted toward the mirror above the mantel. Evelyn's eyes did the same. A moment later, the air had changed again. A faint static threaded through the room, small and dry and wrong, as if the house had begun receiving a signal it had not agreed to carry. Cassian took his hand off the doorknob with visible effort.
Because,
he said,
I will not be able to stay through the night.
Silence followed. Mercy stared at him as if language itself had just betrayed her personally.
Why?
Cassian glanced toward the nearest archway. Lately, the thresholds seemed to know him. The front door had paused before letting him in. The hallway between the foyer and parlor had felt subtly wrong beneath his feet, as though it had stretched and then drawn back. The mirror by the front counter had held him a moment too long. Even the intersections on the drive over had seemed to tense as he passed through them. Something in the city had begun to recognize him again. Maybe it remembered his name. The curse was awakening.
We found her,
he said.
That's what I promised I would do. I got you this far.
Mercy's face changed, shifting from impatience and fury, finding the outline of a larger fear, and faltered.
No,
she said. Cassian gave her a look of regret that might have become pity in a weaker man.
The road is starting to pull again.
As if summoned by the words, the room answered. The standing lamp hissed faintly. Somewhere upstairs, a door swung half open, then shut. With measured patience, the static thickened. Alice flinched and glanced toward the back room. Mercy took another step forward.
Fight it.
Cassian's mouth bent very slightly.
That is what it looks like.
Only then did Evelyn move. She crossed the room slowly, not toward Mercy, but toward Cassian, and when she reached him, she did not touch him at once. She only looked at him the way mothers look at sons when the truth had arrived, wearing another face, and they have no time left to pretend otherwise.
You felt it before you came in, she said.
Yes.
And it worsened at the thresholds.
Yes.
Mercy looked between them.
What are you saying?
Evelyn answered without taking her eyes off Cassian.
The city has begun rejecting his staying. The roads under him are moving.
Mercy's breath hitched. torn in so many different ways all at once. He'd found her daughter. Lenore had finally turned from sorrow into geography.
But he just found her.
Mercy objected.
He cannot leave now.
Cassian let out one quiet breath.
I wish I could stay.
He said. The mirror over the mantel gave a sharp little tremor in its frame. Everyone turned, and in the silver of the glass, for the smallest instant, something moved. Clearer this time. At first it seemed like the ordinary treachery of old mirrors, a ripple in the reflection, a trick of candlelight, the sort of distortion antique class enjoyed producing because straight answers bored it. Then the silver deepened from within, darkening, not like a surface, but like a depth. Alice stopped breathing. A hand struck the inside of the mirror, landing hard enough to leave pale lines, racing across the glass like cracks made of frost and moonlight. It was a human hand, desperate fingers, familiar in the worst possible way. Then a face lunged up behind it, Renard Blackwood. His fox face as seen through drowned silver and the bad manners of another world. His features warped and shifted with the glass, cheekbone lengthening, eyes shadowed strangely, mouth moving around a word the room could not receive. He looked furious, alive and trapped. He glared like a man trying to force himself through a memory that had forgotten how to open. The house answered him. Every old board in the parlor seemed to listen. The mirrors along the far wall shivered in sympathy. Somewhere above them, the chandeliers gave one chiming tremor, as if the crew had recognized one of its own knocking from a terrible distance and did not yet know how to unlatch the door. Renard struck the glass again. This time the word almost crossed.
Lou!
Then the silver snapped flat, and the mirror returned them to themselves. Alice realized only afterward that Evelyn had seized her wrist hard enough to bruise. Mercy stood rigid, all other thoughts driven clean out of her for one raw instant. Cassian had gone very still indeed, and the house, old and listening and full of the half-remembered dead, seemed to settle around them with the uneasy air of something trying very hard to remember a name. Farewell. For a moment after the mirror went flat, no one moved. The room seemed to have inhaled and forgotten the next step. Alice still stood by the mantel, Evelyn's hand hard around her wrist. Mercy's whole body had gone rigid. Every nerve in her tuned first to Lenore, then to Renard, then back again with the brutal speed of a heart trying to answer too many griefs at once. Cassian stood nearest the door, very still, his face emptied of all but concentration. The house gave a low, wooden sigh from somewhere deep in its frame. Cassian shut his eyes. When he opened them again, he looked briefly older, in the posture, in the way a man looks when something invisible has finally put its hand on the center of his back and begun to steer.
It's time,
he said. Mercy turned at him at once.
No.
The word broke out of her raw and immediate, carrying fury because fury was faster than sorrow and often better dressed. Cassian went to her, steady and tired and far too clear.
Yes.
The lamp nearest the mantel flickered once, twice, then steadied with visible reluctance. The door to the back room shuddered in its frame, though no wind touched it. The thresholds of the house had begun behaving like watchful animals. Mercy could feel it now, the strange attention pressing at the edges of the room. Every doorway seemed to know Cassian was here. Every passage seemed already halfway engaged in the business of taking him elsewhere. To her credit, Alice understood she had become superfluous in the way intelligent people occasionally manage just before disaster. She backed toward the parlor arch with the careful movements of someone leaving a church or a bomb.
I'll be upstairs.
She said, her voice thin.
In case the mirrors do anything scholarly.
No one answered, but she escaped with her dignity mostly intact. Then it was only Mercy, Evelyn and Cassian, with the crew listening around them like an old creature, keeping still for pain. Mercy crossed the room in 3 swift steps.
You cannot do this now,
she said.
You cannot hand me her name, her address, her life, and then vanish. She is there because you found her. You do not get to stop being part of this at the door.
Cassian received that without flinching.
I know.
No.
Mercy's hands opened helplessly at her sides.
No, I don't think you do.
Her voice thinned then, urgency breaking through the anger.
She's there. Do you understand me? She is there. My daughter is sleeping somewhere under the same night in the same city, and every part of me is already running towards her. I do not have room for this. I do not have time to lose you too.
Cassian looked down briefly, a movement so slight it might have been a bow or a wound. When he looked back up, something gentler had entered his face.
I'm not choosing to go,
he said.
That is the one mercy in this, and also the problem.
Mercy made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob, the kind produced only when the world had become offensive in several directions at once.
You have terrible timing.
Yes,
he said.
Historically.
The weak attempt at humor almost made the moment bearable. Almost. Mercy stepped closer and caught his sleeve in both hands, gripping the dark fabric as if she might negotiate with curse and road and old sentence through stubbornness alone.
You got me here,
she said lower now.
Do you hear me? Whatever happens next, whatever that orphanage holds, whatever name she bears when I see her, you got me here.
Cassian's expression changed again. Some old hardness and tight control loosened at the edges.
I know.
No,
Mercy said, eyes burning.
You do not get to hide inside those 2 words. I need you to hear the rest. I am grateful to you. I am furious with you. I would like to shake you and bless you in one equal measure, but I do not know which one would make me cry harder.
At that, one corner of his mouth moved, and just a ghost of a smile, brief, unwilling, real.
Then do neither,
he said softly.
Go get your daughter.
Mercy let out one broken breath, and before she could think better of it, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead once to his shoulder. Mercy was not a woman given to displays of emotion or affection. She kept as tight a rein on her emotions as Cassian. The moment lasted only long enough to say what language could not. When she drew back, her eyes were bright and merciless.
You come back,
she said.
I will.
Do not say that unless you mean it.
Cassian held her gaze.
I mean it.
Then Evelyn moved. She refused to hurry or interrupt their moment. She waited near the hearth, with her hands loose at her sides, watching with the unbearable stillness only ancient sorrow knows how to perfect. Now she crossed the room slowly, and Mercy stepped aside without being asked. For one moment, mother and son only looked at one another. All the centuries sat there with them. Abel's blood, dust roads, exile, and the long, grotesque labor of surviving oneself. The years in which love had curdled into accusation, and accusation into distance, and distance into legend. All of it stood in the room, and then, very gently, failed to matter as much as the fact that he was here now, within reach. Evelyn lifted one hand. She touched his face with the backs of her fingers first, as if reacquainting herself with permission. Then her palm settled against his cheek. Cassian closed his eyes. There was no speech prepared for this. Words could not convey the multitudes. Evelyn had lived too long for performance to interest her in real grief. "My son," she said quietly. That was all, but it was enough to break the world clean through. Cassian covered her hand with his own and held it there, openly, without recoil, without irony, without the old half-stepped back that had once lived in his bones as naturally as breath.
I know,
he said. Her thumb moved once against his cheek, a small human gesture with the weight of scripture in it.
"When the road loosens," she said, "you come home."
The words were simple. The blessing underneath them were not. Something old moved through the room with them, older than churches, older than kings, older than the stories men later told about mothers to make themselves feel less frightened of beginnings. Cassian bent his head slightly.
I will come back to visit.
A tear slipped free at last. Evelyn did not wipe it away.
"Good,"
she said.
"I have had enough of losing sons to permanence."
He let out one quiet breath that might have been a laugh if laughter had felt equal to the occasion. Then the front door gave another sharp shudder as the house had reached the end of its patience. Cassian stepped back. The room seemed to resist him for a second, as though the old boards themselves objected. Then he turned, crossed the shop floor, and put his hand on the latch. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. Mercy stood with both hands pressed hard against her mouth. Evelyn stood straight despite the tears on her face. Behind them, the mirrors watched in strained silver silence. Cassian inclined his head once, to both of them. Then he opened the door. Humid night air moved in around him. The city waited beyond the steps, full of roads that never ended, where decent people thought they should. He went down into it without another word. The door closed behind him with the final, soft sound of a house being forced to let go. Thank you for listening to Tongue of the Serpent. Tonight Sabine reached through the mirror with the morning. Morvant is not finished with her, but she was not alone in the glass. Something or someone else was trying to get through. Mercy and Cassian followed the sisters' trail past Alexandria and back to New Orleans, where the records finally opened like a locked drawer, giving up its teeth. Lenore's path did not end in the past. The evidence suggests she remained in the sisters' care, alive, protected, and still somewhere in the city. But hope rarely arrives alone in New Orleans. The moment the trail opened, Cassian began to feel the road pulling at him again. His promise had carried Mercy this far, but promises are doors, and some doors do not stay open kindly. Next time, Lucien and Madame Claudette go into the crypt in search of Sabine's body. Renard tries again to reach the crew through the mirror line, and Mercy learns that finding her daughter may cost her another farewell. Until then, keep your mirrors covered when they grow too still. Be careful what paperwork survives, and remember, sometimes the thing everyone forgets to erase is the thing that finally tells the truth.